Hello, my name is Sarah, and I am your Chakra Coach. On this podcast, we'll be exploring how the chakra system can help guide you to grow your emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual wellness, leading you closer to your highest self. Hello, and welcome to the show. I am so glad that you're here, and I'm so grateful that you've chosen to take some time in your day to listen to this episode. If you're listening the week or so that this episode releases, we're about 2 weeks into 2024, and I don't know about you, but I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I want this year to look like. Even if you're listening well after the release, you may be trying to figure out what you want your future to look like. For me, it's kind of an ongoing process. I, I try really hard to stay flexible in this way because I want to be open to whatever the universe has in store. Have you ever done that thing where you pick a word for the year? I'd never done it until last year, and then I picked the word authentic. My goal was to have a year filled with choices and decisions and actions that were really authentic to me, who I want to be, how I wanted to take the direction of my life, and to quit doing things that weren't in touch with my authentic self as I understood it in the moment. And I made some gigantic missteps, to be really honest with you. But I also made some great choices, some really hard ones too, where I let people down in order to return to that deep core of myself. And despite the difficulty of it, generally I'm very pleased with the work I did, even if it wasn't easy. And of course, it's not done. But this year I'm doing the word thing again, and I've chosen aligned. Very similar, I think, but thanks to what I already did, I have a good handle, I think, for now, a good handle on what is authentic. Now it's time to work in alignment with that core self, which brings us to today's guest. She's a repeat guest because on our last episode, number 189 on Chakra Science, TeriLeigh and I touched on affirmations, but we didn't have time to explore them. So I invited her back to talk about how to create affirmations that work, affirmations that are aligned with what we want in life. And while it's simple, it's not as easy as you might imagine. But TeriLeigh takes us through the process and explains why each step is so important. Have you ever tried affirmations and then decided they just didn't work for you? Well, it turns out that it may be the wording, the intention, the sound of the words themselves, a mismatch between your body and your brain. So many things that could potentially stand between us and the fulfillment of our affirmation. TeriLeigh is going to help us clear all that up with her usual pragmatic, practical, and kind advice. As a mindfulness coach and chakras expert, TeriLeigh is a wisdom weaver, monkey mind shusher, stress whisperer, happiness amplifier, and negativity crusher. TeriLeigh helps spiritually minded, sensitive souls through critical life events and major life changes, such as divorces or breakups, grief and loss, career shifts or retirement, caring for a sick loved one, or significant health challenges and body changes. TeriLeigh has taught over 200,000 students and worked privately with over 2,000 clients. With a master's degree in teaching and over 20 years' experience in yoga and mindfulness, and a passion for neuroscience and brain and nervous system training, she provides scientific and practical approaches to spirituality and personal growth teachings. I hope you enjoy our conversation. TeriLeigh, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me again.
Oh, my pleasure. So when last we met, we were talking about your specific method that you use to balance the chakras, and you mentioned affirmations and how they need to be put together specifically in a particular way so that they work. And so today I want to talk about like why aren't our affirmations working and how can we make small changes so that they do work in the way that we're hoping they will. So I guess let's first start with just a very brief sort of what is an affirmation, and why should we use them in our chakra balancing practice and just in our lives?
Affirmation, I also use somewhat interchangeably with the word intention,
Hmm.
is the activation of a thought in our minds. But if we don't work with it right, it just sort of gets stuck in our heads and kind of a loop in our brains. And we need to get those affirmations, intentions, those thoughts to be things that move through our nervous system into our bodies. And once they're in our bodies, then we can actually transform them into action because our bodies are what do and our minds are what create. So we need that two-step level. And that's why what we talked about last time with the Mosey method being a three-step approach to balancing your chakras. You
Hmm.
think a thought, you do an action, you breathe a breath. That triad of mind, body, spirit. It's the same thing with affirmations, and just we're getting a deeper layer into it today. The affirmation or the intention is the actual thought, the creation of something we want to manifest or achieve in our lives. And the first step is to create an affirmation or an intention that is very clear, very concise, so that the body can receive it in a way that the body can then transform it into action.
So I've heard things like you can't use a negative affirmation because your body can't hear negatives or something like that. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, the brain works very, very, very fast. And so when you use a negative, your brain is going to think and send that negative thought through your body, and your body's going to feel that negative. So if you're speaking your affirmation in the negative and then countering it with an opposite, so for example, I am not angry.
Mm.
Your brain hears the word angry and sends that word through your system and then has to reverse it with the not. So you're actually
Um,
getting a contradictory message through your system.
you're sending
So you're
yourself your
much
own mixed messages.
right, right, because you're actually hearing and feeling the word angry, and then you have to back yourself out of that with the word not. So you're much better off to phrase that affirmation or that intention in the immediate positive of what you want to create rather than what you don't want to have.
And so you could say, I am calm, which would be an easier thing for your body to understand. But if I'm understanding just from our previous conversations, when we select the word, you might not want to feel calm. So you have to really select the thing that you say you are with great care.
Yes.
Let's get into that a little bit. Like how to select the I am whatever specific thing we want to be.
So, for example, if you're in a moment of anger and you are trying to not be angry, and instead of saying, I am not angry, you say, I am calm, but you don't feel any sense of calm in your body, you're going to have a fight going on between your brain and your body. That's
Hmm.
not going to work either. You want to activate an intention that matches something you're already feeling that you want to amplify. So instead of saying, I am not angry, and instead of saying, I am calm, because none of those are really what you want to achieve and what you actually have going on, you might say, I am passionate. And that takes that energy of the angry, but it flips it a little bit inside out because
Hmm.
it's still a very active, a very kinetic energy, the word passionate, but it's giving a synonym to the word angry that is something you do want to achieve.
That makes so much sense to me. I feel like I have, in points in my life, intuitively done that in some ways when I've been feeling afraid or scared or nervous. I try to redirect that anger and say, I'm excited, right? Because
Right.
sometimes that feels the same, excitement can feel the same as nervous in my body.
But if my brain is like, I am excited about this prospect as opposed to I am nervous about this situation. Is that kind of what you mean? Like a bit of a
Exactly.
reframe?
Exactly. It is a reframe to get your brain and your body to talk to each other in the same language. And you don't want them talking to each other in opposite languages, and you don't want to them talking to each other in too many negatives or double negatives or triple negatives,
Hmm,
where it
hmm.
gets to be too much going on. So that's another thing, like not speaking in the negative, which I just did, speaking only in the positive, but also stating your affirmation in very short and simple terms.
Hmm.
Because I hear so often people will spend these hours and hours and hours creating these intentions or the affirmations or these mission statements, and they end up being full paragraphs. And full paragraphs are just too much for the body to absorb all at once. So you want to simplify, 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 and look at that full paragraph and cull it down to no more than 5 to 7 words total.
Oh,
And
really?
two of those words being I am. So the longest affirmation you'd ever want to do would be I am and 3 words.
Okay, so very, very clear and short,
Yes,
so that there's no mistaking what you're trying to say. We don't. What we're looking to do is reduce any confusion. When it gets from your
exactly.
brain to your body, the body's like, I know exactly what that is.
Because it's so easy in that paragraph to throw in a negative or to say something you don't quite intend or to give an energy of something that you're unconscious about. So you want to be very careful and precise in choosing the words in only 3 short, powerful words. But that's another piece that's really key is that you want to choose a powerful word. If you choose a word that's overused, doesn't have power and meaning within you, or doesn't really resonate with your moods and emotions, it's going to be just that. It's going to fall flat.
And this
And
is why you
so,
recommend people sort of create their own affirmations or work with, like you're a coach, you help people design those affirmations, but rather than just like Googling one.
right, right. Because you want it to be something that activates moods and emotions within you. And because when you get a word that triggers a mood and emotion, that's when the hormones and the energies in your body really get going. And when you feel something, that's when the action becomes more of a reality. So, for example, one of the very common affirmations that people want to use is I am abundant. But the
Mm,
word abundant is way overused and it loses a lot of its power. And then people might say, instead of I am abundant, they might say I am wealthy. But then if they're saying I am wealthy and they don't feel wealthy and they don't really own that feeling somewhere inside themselves, then they're contradicting themselves because they're not feeling it. They're saying I'm wealthy, but they're not. And then they're just amplifying the feeling of not being wealthy and feeling more in lack.
okay.
Or even the word I am rich. Well, you can turn that a little bit around in your brain. I am rich with all these other things, but maybe I'm not rich with money. But again, those are words that are way overused. They've almost become diluted because they're used so often. So I recommend that you use words that are not common that create some sort of feeling inside you. So I'll give you my personal abundance affirmation. I am lusciously luxurious.
Does that make you feel lusciously luxurious?
It does. And you know what I
Yeah.
can do is as I'm saying that affirmation, I can bring up a memory in my mind that then triggers the moods and emotions and the hormones in my body of a time that I did feel luscious and luxurious. And
So,
whether that was a time was at a spa or a time I was bathing in the sun, I can create a memory where, oh, yeah, I have that in me. I know what it's like to be lusciously luxurious.
okay, so we have these affirmations that speak to things we do feel. Um, so that we have this emotional trigger, we have this connection to the body, and the body can take action. when the body takes action, do we move closer to these other things that we want to be? Like, since we're talking about it, you feel say like, oh, sunbathing or being at a spa really has nothing to do with like actual money in your bank account. But then if that is your like sort of say end goal, does it move you closer because you're able to have that sense of abundance? Tell me the process there. How does that work?
How that works goes back to the science of how the brain works. And I don't remember if we talked about this in our last call, but in our last podcast, it goes back to the reticular activating system, which is the part of your brain, the RAS, that filters information that comes in from the outside world. And so if you're saying lusciously luxurious, or you're saying these words that activate these memories of times you have had these things, your RAS is going to say, oh, that's important to you. That memory you had was important. So now if you keep repeating that memory in your system, your RAS is going to say, if that's important, I'm going to point out to you other times that happen in your world that are also lusciously luxurious. And you're going to be more receptive to receiving those times as they appear in your world. Because wealth and abundance is out there. We just, as individuals in our brains, we shut it off because we focus on what we think is there, and our RAS has filtered them in or out. So by flipping that affirmation and activating that trigger in our bodies and our nervous system, it tells your reticular activation system in your brain to flip that filter and start seeing that thing more and more often.
And so this would work with all manner of things, right? We're talking about whatever wealth, abundance, etc. That's a very common one, but it would work also with I am peaceful or something like that. Then you would start to notice your RAS would say, you are peaceful now. Notice this. And then when we start to notice things, when we start to be aware of them, we experience them more, and then we become more so of the thing that we are affirming daily. Am I understanding right? Have I got the handle of it?
Yes. That's a great example, because let's look at the word peaceful and the energy of the concept of peace. Now, there's many, many synonyms we could come up with: tranquility, calm, serenity, all those different synonyms. And you got to play with yourself. Which synonym makes you feel the most tranquil, peace, serene, whatever. However, when you're in a world, there is chaos and peace everywhere. You could be in a very chaotic situation and everything's going all over crazy. But if your brain is trained in its RAS to find the peace, even when there's chaos, you might for a moment look out the window and see a bird on the tree. And that bird on the tree is peacefully singing. You wouldn't notice that if your RAS hadn't filtered that through in the midst of all the chaos going on inside the room. And so your RAS is more aware to notice the things that are that thing, even when the opposite of it is occurring at the same time.
So the affirmation or the intention, I think you said this earlier, acts as an amplifier for things that already exist that you might not notice otherwise. Exactly. It acts as a brain trainer almost.
Exactly. Which then, like we talked about last time, when you're training your brain, you're training your chakras. And when you're training your chakras, you're rewiring how your energy in your world works. You're not changing the outside world at all. That's always going to be the way it is. You're changing your perception of it, and you're changing your reality and your experience of it. The opposites of everything is always existing in the world. For example, I have a client who's going through a very challenging time in that she's a recent widow. She recently suddenly lost her husband. And at the same time, she's reconnecting with amazing people in her past that are developing these new and powerful relationships that she hadn't paid attention to for 30 years. So she's going through both this intense pain and grief, and at the same time, this intense love and joy with these new relationships that, oh, your husband died. I haven't talked to you in 30 years. Let's reconnect. Those are very opposite emotions, and they can coexist. You can live with grief and pain at the same time as having joy and love. And you can notice and feel them both at the same time. And the person who notices and feels them both coincide, and I don't want to say coincidentally, because that implies that it's accidental, but they are coinciding at the same time. That's a very full experience of life. And that joy offsets and almost, it doesn't amplify or decrease the grief. It just makes it more valid and beautiful.
Yeah,
And that then
creates a little
frames your chakras to,
non-judgmental space for it.
right. And then that creates this existential experience of life that your chakras are able to balance these opposites in much more power. So
Well, and
going back
that's
to affirmation, this client is affirming to herself, I am grieving and I am living.
right, because like you said, the affirmation isn't to change the outside world. All of this I am living affirmation in the world isn't going to bring the husband back, right? That is still going to be
Right.
a thing because we're not looking to fight reality. We're just looking to maybe experience reality in a different way
And accept it
and
and then
accept
find
it.
the beauty in it, even if it is painful.
Okay. I think that is so interesting because I think sometimes we think we're using affirmations to change the world. Like
Right.
maybe like our intention, and maybe that's another reason why they're not working is because
Exactly.
we're using them kind of in a way that they're not intended to be used,
Right.
right? So
Right.
that's interesting.
You're
I
using
want
them as a tool to do something that they're not meant to do. They're not meant to change the outside world. They're
yeah,
meant to change your inner perception of the outside world.
right. Like using a hammer to screw a screw is never going to work. That's just because this is the wrong tool for that job. And
Right.
so we're use our affirmation hammer on an affirmation nail as opposed to something
Right.
else.
Do you have something to say that the world needs to hear? Of course you do. If you want to turn your ideas into a podcast, Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere, and even earn a little money. All in one place, for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. I like it because it's easy to use and to get support when I need it. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Do you recommend or do you work through with your clients like all of these synonyms? Because I do feel like I could easily sort of just for me drop to what would seem to be the most common. Like again, let's go to that peaceful one. I am peaceful. That was the first thing that popped into my head. And I do love the word peaceful, but then you said like tranquility, serenity. Oh, maybe that's actually closer to what I'm looking for. Do
Right.
you recommend people work through synonyms and then how do you work through a list of synonyms and determine which one is right for you?
So that is the work of a linguist. And yes, if you're doing this on your own, make a big list of synonyms and read each one out loud and see how each one feels for you. When I work one-on-one with a client, it takes that a whole nother elevated level because I am a linguist. I've spent my entire life studying sound and words and letters and how they evoke different emotions. And so one of the things I do is I not only come up with synonyms, but I come up with careful linguistic tools, almost poetic, onomatopoeic, and alliterative. So go back to luscious, luxurious, the L sound, the X sound, the sound, luscious, the U of that. has a whole different energy because that sound is creating almost like a music does. It trips your nerves in different ways.
For
And it's
sure.
going to trip my nerves different than it's going to trip someone else. So I play with words. And as I'm playing with words, I'm watching my clients and paying attention to their auras and chakras and seeing how they're shifting as I'm using different words. And I can pick out the different letters and the different combinations and the different poetic devices, alliteration, onomatopoeia, rhyme, and so forth. But also paying attention to the different types of sounds. Like an L is very lingering. It's a sound that can go on and on and on. Well, that's why I chose it for the abundance manifestation or affirmation, because I want something that lingers. I want abundance to linger like an L, you know.
Oh, interesting, because if you, I am rich, and then the word's over, it's
It's
done.
like I got it once.
Yeah, I
Boom,
am
I got a
rich.
whole bunch
The end.
once.
I like, you feel the end of that sentence. It's a hard stop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you want to listen to the ways the sounds work and then choose. If you want a harsh sound, you're going to, if you want a harsh, powerful, use a K, a C, something like that, or a D. If
Mm-hmm.
you want something bouncy, use a B or a P. If you want something soft and mothering, use an M or a W or an N, or even an F. It's very feminine. So one of my best examples that's easiest to show about how sounds work is a client came to me saying, I'm a strong, independent woman. How many women say that? I'm a strong, independent woman. And the sounds of that word, that affirmation, very T, very D, very strong, which is masculine sounds, very masculine sounds in that affirmation. So I told her to shift it to, I am a phenomenal woman, which has that F, M, and N sounds, which is very womanly, very feminine sounds without even saying the word feminine. And the word phenomenal has that growing, voluptuous energy to it.
Yeah,
And it
it feels
totally changed
broad.
her energy. She became more feminine rather than forceful masculine. She became more feminine, but she didn't lose the strength. She just translated the strength from masculine to feminine.
Yeah, in a
So
way that made sense for who she was and who
yeah.
she
So you
is.
want to choose which letters you're using, as well as the meanings that those words have for you. And sometimes it's not a word, sometimes it's a metaphor. Like I have another client that her affirmation is I am hawk.
Hmm.
And that evokes a whole emotion for her that is many words in one, because it gives her the image of a hawk, which is flying and free, but it also has the sharp beak and talons of strong and predatorial and powerful. And then you think of all the magic and totem Native American medicine around the concept of hawk, and it means so much more.
So as we're selecting our words for our affirmations, it sounds like there's just an extraordinary amount to consider, but this is why it should be done so carefully. And again, just going back to it, this is why our, like, here's my top 10 affirmations maybe aren't working for you specifically, because they weren't designed for you specifically. They don't evoke those emotions, right? I feel like if I said I am hawk, I would be like, what? I don't even know what that means, right? Like, but that's not, because it's not for me, right? And
Exactly.
so, like, I might something, I am falcon, I don't know, just something that is more specific to each individual. And so you obviously coach people through that, but it feels like also for potentially people could kind of play with it. It might take longer, but they could, but you could play with it and explore it and note those
Yeah.
vibrations in your body, because it sounds like it's really more about the emotional trigger than it is about the word
Yes.
itself, but the word itself has the emotional triggers.
Yes. And the way the word triggers the emotions is through the sounds in the letters, as well as the connotation that we hold and the perception of what that word means to us individually and personally. So it is a very personal process. And when I work with clients, we spend an hour to 90 minutes just creating one affirmation sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And once we get that affirmation, then we spend time creating the physical action that links that thought to the body. and working with that to create the breath that works with that to manifest a full Mosey method exercise that only takes 10 seconds once you have it.
Right. Yes, we talked about that last time, right? It's very short. It's doable. You could do it 100 times a day.
Right.
But the creation of it is the important thing.
Right. And then over time, it might evolve.
Okay.
As the lusciously luxurious might evolve into just luxury. As you use it over time, it might even condense itself more, or it might evolve into something different that's similar, but now you've got that feeling and you want it to shift. It's an organic process that is never quite static.
I think that's wonderful, though. Like, things that aren't static make me hopeful, because it feels like then you're not at the end, right? That you're
Right.
always in a moving state of flow, right? I'm not like, oh, and then I've reached the end and I am now currently luxury, like now I'm done, right? Like, there's no sense of,
Done never happens. That's not the laws of science. The
oh,
laws of the
yeah, how
universe
about
is
that?
it's constantly flowing, constantly evolving,
Right.
constantly cycling and shifting and changing.
Right. Which is why when people say, well, how do I know if my chakras are balanced? I'm like, oh, if you ever get there, let me know. If you ever have that moment where you're like, I'm perfectly in alignment, and then you're able to hold on to it, like, amazing. But so I think that's really fascinating. I want to ask, and I hope this isn't a dumb question, but affirmations, you said, 2 of your 5 words are I am. And it truly needs to be I am, not I will, or I want, or I could, right? It's supposed to be in the present tense. Can you talk a little bit about why that
Yes,
is?
there's two sides to that. There's a connotative, conceptual, what does the word I am actually mean? And you pointed that out. If you're saying I will, you're putting it in the future. And the future never really happens. It's always something about to happen. So you want it in this present moment so that you can actually experience it here and now. And you don't want it in the past either. And you want it as something that is attainable, that you're feeling right now in this moment to activate that trigger in your emotions in your body. So there's that piece. The connotative I am actually means right here, right now, I am owning this feeling. But then there's also a deeper level of what the words I am mean. And that goes back to breath. When you breathe, inhale and out, exhale, the sound that makes is soham or hamsa. And in Sanskrit, soham, hamsa literally translates to I am that. I am part of the whole. I am part of the whole universe and everything, because what I breathe in is the air of the world and the air of spirit. And what I breathe out is the air of me, the air of spirit. And spirit is constantly cycling. So soham, hamsa, that sound of breath, if you listen to it, your breath actually sounds like soham. You're affirming that concept of I am part of everything. And so the words I am are necessary because it's showing you that I am part of this. This is part of me. It's part of the whole universe. And I'm open to being aware of that and receiving that. And then you add that 1, 2, or 3 more words after it. And that's just training your RAS that part of the whole universe is this, this, and this.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I was like, oh, I am part of the universe, including the calm parts, including the abundant parts, including the whatever it is that you're hoping for in your life to experience more of. I am
They're
part of the
all
world
there.
that already contains that.
Right.
So,
And there's the shadow side of that too, where you are also the chaos, the confusion. All those things do exist. And so in the soham hamsa, you have to recognize that you can't make those things go away.
mhm,
You can't make them stop. They're out there. They're always out there. The dualistic nature of the world exists, and we can embrace both. And we
right.
can notice and affirm those that we're feeling as lacking when those that are over abundant and too much we can notice these more so that these soften. It doesn't make them any less. It just makes us be able to accept them more. Hence the widow. She's accepting the grieving because she's also embracing the joy.
I think it's like when a lot of people want to balance, like, let's say the root chakra, and they're like, I have so much fear. I want to get rid of the fear and I want to feel secure. And the fact is, the fear is also part of all that is and will continue to exist. What we want to do, I think, is, like you said, soften it or balance, as opposed
Yes,
to shut off any one part of the world. We want to balance it so that we experience all of the
right.
parts, but in ways that make more sense for us, or are
Exactly. Because
perhaps a little bit more comfortable.
we need the fear.
Hmm.
If we don't have fear, we're going to run off a cliff because it looks like fun. Fear is what keeps us safe. Fear is what helps us temper our whims into some sort of balanced emotion. So we
Hmm.
need both sides of everything,
So we need
but
the
we've
fear
got
for
to
survival,
balance
but
them.
we don't want too much fear because that keeps us small, and it
Right,
doesn't lead us into that abundance, to
right.
use a common word.
And if our blinders are totally focused on just the fear, we're ignoring this whole world of freedom and
Hmm.
joy and expression. So we want to take down the blinders, keep the fear, and recognize there's all this too. It's all there.
Yeah, it's not like an or, one or the other. It's a both and situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to talk about sort of the musicality and the resonance of language and words, because affirmations, the way we're talking about them now, and intentions, feel like they would work best in your native language, or a language that you speak very well, that your brain understands. Is that true? Because that's where you have the richest emotional connection.
It could be, but that's not to say that a Sanskrit affirmation doesn't work
Hmm.
or a Spanish affirmation doesn't work. If you hear a word and it really feels good to you, then you go with the feeling.
Okay.
So, another example, tranquilo is a word in Spanish that my husband uses to get my dog to calm down.
It's your
He
dog's
just,
affirmation.
it's her affirmation, tranquilo. And the way he says it is very tranquil,
Hmm.
tranquilo. And she hears it and she knows, oh, you know, and it's Spanish and it doesn't mean anything to me, but it does to him. And
Hmm.
because it does to him, when he says it to her, it calms both of them down. And
Interesting.
so, and Spanish isn't his native language. I've studied a lot of Sanskrit because of my
Yes.
yoga practice. And in that studying of Sanskrit, I've listened to many, many chants. And oftentimes those chants are connected to vibrations of music that have moved me to tears. I have no idea what the real meaning of the word is because so much of it gets lost in translation,
Right.
in the cognitive understanding of it. But I have a visceral body emotion understanding of it that is much more powerful than the cognitive. So if I say I am Shanti, or just the word Shanti, because I've repeated that affirmation in chanting and I feel it on the musical chanting level, it's much more powerful to me than the word peace, which is the literal cognitive translation of Shanti.
I think that must be why mantra works, because mantra is like affirmations, to me, like, on a different level, right? To me, it's more of a primal level, to me,
Yes.
something that sits below my level of, like, understanding. I have the same sort of experience with Sanskrit for a lot of the same reasons, right? As you're studying yoga, you learn this, and they talk about the creation of the Sanskrit language being, you know,
Right.
the ancients spending generations exploring the sound and making sure that the sounds all work together and resonate with the various frequencies of the universe, which is all wonderful and beautiful. And so I guess I was just curious about using words from other languages, and so you're saying it's fine if that is something that means something to you, because again, like we were saying, it's not about the word, it's about
Right.
the emotional, the connections, the experience of the word,
Right.
and the letters and the sounds of the vowels and all of that are part of that. What about like
Exactly.
a made up word? Am I going too far now?
No, that works great. And if you're that kind of person, my husband is a linguist and he writes music all the time, and he's always making up words. And when he makes up those words, they have power for him. And sometimes made up words have more power too. Like I remember way back in the 80s, I didn't know this was a word. I thought it was something that Bill Cosby made up when he called it a zerbert, the little thing you
Oh yeah,
do on
yeah.
someone's belly to make them giggle. And there's no vowels in that word. It's ZRRBT, but that has so much power as a made up concept.
I also think sort of, at some point all words were made up, so what's the harm of
Yeah,
making up yet another one?
right.
Right. Yeah, I just
And if
said
you
some
make it
cool
up
stuff.
using different letters that evoke that emotion, biggle bobble. What is biggle bobble? It's not a word, but it certainly makes you feel bouncy.
Certainly makes you
And
feel something.
it has a lot more bounciness than bouncy. Biggle bobble, biggle bobble. Okay.
Okay. So maybe that's the emotional connection that you want. So once somebody has created the perfect affirmation for where they are right now, what's the best way to even use one? Are you a stare at yourself in the mirror and shout it 5 times kind of lady? Are you a sit quietly with it? Should they be said aloud? Like what? Now I have the perfect affirmation. I am Biggle Bobble or whatever you said. Like, what do I do with that? Where do I
The
go
answer
from
is
here?
yes, all of the above.
All of the above. Okay.
Whichever action, physical doing of something evokes that emotion in you, do that. If sitting quietly is part of it, if journaling about it is part of it, if meditating on it is part of it, if chanting it is part of it, all those things work. What works most with how the brain works is the more you do it, the better. Repetition. The brain needs repetition to build those neurological wirings to make it automatic. And once it's automatic and you're doing it automatically, then it becomes your reality because it just is. So what I do encourage is my clients, once we've got the affirmation, we link it to a physical action, something they physically do with their body that matches the intention. And we link it to a breath, Mosey method,
Right.
body, mind, breath. And they practice that body, mind, breath as many times a day as they possibly can. It's only 10 seconds. So you can do it while standing in line. You can do it while showering. You can do it while brushing your teeth. You can do it while doing dishes. You can do it while playing with your kid. You do it as often as you can. And the more often you do it, the faster it becomes a reality. And the faster it becomes a reality, the more it becomes automatic. And as soon as it becomes automatic, that is just how your life is now. And then it needs to evolve.
And then it evolves. Do you, in your practice, do you have people do one affirmation at a time, like until it becomes part of their life, or do you have multiple affirmations? I feel like sometimes I hear practices where people say like 3 or 4 or 5 affirmations kind of in a row. Do you think it's more effective to just like really focus on one and like integrate that into your being? What are your thoughts on
Yes.
that? Okay.
And yes,
I
and
love that. It's both and.
it's both and. So some people really need just one. Typically, when I work with clients, I take them through a series of 10 sessions with me, and it's session number 2 that we do the intentions after they learn the breathing.
Right.
And so in session number 2, we usually come up with 3 intentions, depending on the client. And then we track those intentions over the next several weeks as they learn each chakra and balance and align each chakra with those 3 intentions. Sometimes those 3 intentions are interconnected with each other, and sometimes they're completely different aspects of their lives and their worlds that they want to focus on and track as they go through the process. It really depends on the person. And some people are very multidimensional people, and 3 isn't enough. Some people are very linear, and 1 is all they want to handle. So
I
yes,
could also,
Anne.
I could also see like what's happening in your life right now that you're trying to bring this affirmation into, right? If your life is
Right.
extraordinarily busy or there's a lot of different things going on, 1 might be a way that you sort of like focus in and bring peace or whatever it is, focus to your life, as opposed to like, and I'm going to work on these 8 aspects of my whole life, right? Like, I mean, and sometimes you might be in a place where that's fine. And other times it might feel better to just be like, I just need a second to focus on 1 little thing.
Right.
So that's very interesting. Does
I
each
personally usually work with 3 at a time.
3 at a time?
And then I notice as they evolve, they tend to blend into 1. Like I'll have 3 different aspects of my life that I'm working on in 3 different affirmations. And as I work with those 3, they subtly mold into 1. And then, oh, I've already got that. It's maybe time to look at a different one.
Interesting. That is so fascinating. But that makes a lot of sense, right? Like that they would evolve and grow towards each other as you become more adept at noticing the
Right.
things and making it your reality. Well, that's so very interesting. I think that was sort of all my questions. I feel like I had a lot of things I really wanted to know about this because I hear that all the time, right? Like I get up every morning and I do my affirmations and they're simply not working. And so this is sort of an explanation as to why they're not working, but also a really solid, like scientific reason about why affirmations do work, right? It's not
Yeah.
necessarily some sort of esoteric mystical thing. It's
It's science.
it's
It's how your
science.
brain
Yeah.
works.
I mean, yeah, everybody go back and listen to my first interview with TeriLeigh. I'll link it in the show notes, but like we really dig into the science of the brain and the nervous system and how the energy travels through all of that. And then this is just a really deep dive into 1 tiny aspect of all of the things that we talked about on that episode. So if you haven't listened already, I absolutely encourage you to go back and take a closer look. TeriLeigh, what have you got kind of going on right now with are you currently accepting clients? I know you have a program coming up, sort of depending on when people are listening to this. Tell us a little bit about where we can find out more about you.
I am currently accepting clients, and I do work one-on-one with clients through both a long, intensive chakra program. If you just want to work with me on affirmations, we can do that as well. So you can find me on my website, TeriLeigh.com, to work with me privately one-on-one. In a group program, I run a group program every January through September where we work in a group of 10 to 15 people, and I take you through the system as a community, a cohort, so to speak, that works through all the chakras. You develop intentions, you each develop your own personal intentions, but you have a group of people to help bounce those ideas off of and come up with new ideas with each other. And then you work as a friendship group to really support each other through balancing and aligning and learning how to work with and calibrate each of your 7 chakras over those 9 months. So that's starting the 3rd Thursday in January. So you can find that also, the group mastermind, on my website. In terms of this particular podcast, I do have a standalone online course on my website called Affirmations that teaches this in a little bit more detail of what letters mean, what sounds, what energies are coming with each sound, and it'll walk you through how to write your own affirmation.
I think that would be extremely beneficial because I think we don't even really consider all of those other possibilities of the emotional triggers of the letters and the sounds. And I mean, every sound has a literal resonance in your head and in your body and in your throat. And so I think learning more about the actual details of that is really interesting. Well, I just wanted to say, TeriLeigh, thank you so much for coming back, because when we started this, this was supposed to be a 1 episode situation. And then I was like, I think I need more information about that. Simply because I do feel like we get stuck in these, like, lists of common affirmations. And now we've learned really how to personalize them and make them sort of work better for our lives. And this is a really good way to understand how to put that together and why. So thank you so, so much for all of that.
It's an honor to work with you, Sarah. I think we have really stimulating conversations.
I agree. I look forward to our next one. Just you wait. All right, my friend. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for listening. I hope you can take what we discussed here and start to create affirmations that really work for you. I know I've already changed my approach after TeriLeigh and I talked. Remember to visit her website to learn more about her work and also to join me on Facebook and Instagram. It's your Chakra Coach everywhere. Have an amazing day, and we will talk again soon. Bye.